Economists at odds over whether Democratic or Republican policies would be best for the American economy over the next 4 years. That question's been scrambled by President Biden's decision to drop out of the race for the White House. Joining us now, Steve Moore, a senior visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and an economic advisor to former President Trump and co-founder of Unleash Prosperity. And Ernie Tedeschi is director of economics at the Budget Lab at the Yale Law School and a former chief economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors under President Biden. And the way we said that, Steve, that it was scrambled by the events over the weekend, would you at least concede it was kind of scrambled when President Trump picked J.D. Vance? What do you think the economic outlook for or program or policies under President Trump looks now? Will they be his, or will they be American Compass and J.D. Vance, which is basically, I don't know, like socialism 2.0 is the way I look at it almost.
Well, Joe, great to be with you. Thanks for holding this debate. I think it is important for people to hold up, what the economy looked like under Donald Trump and what has happened to the economy under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we just put out a report showing out of the 20 most important kind of economic measurements, Trump beats Biden on 18 of the 20. So there's whether it's poverty rates, whether it's real incomes, whether it's small business confidence, with some mortgage interest rates, almost everything has been worse under Biden than under Trump. And the problem for the Democrats right now, if they do run Kamala Harris, how does she run away from that Biden catastrophic economic record, especially with respect to the financial policies of the country, where we've ran up an additional $7 trillion of debt. And by the way, the Republicans are responsible for this too, but Biden came in and really poured kerosene on the fire. So with respect to J.D. Vance, I think the guy is a free marketeer. He has a very solid conservative voting record in Congress, and I think that you'll see under Trump 2.0 policies that were very similar and successful to what happened in the first term.
He's not. You don't think J.D. Vance is whispering into President Trump's ear, we need to go to 28%? Because that's what they tell me that they want to do.
No.
On the corporate tax rate. You sure?
I guarantee, Joe, I'm going to give you an ironclad guarantee that if Trump is reelected, and I think he will be, we will be cutting the corporate tax rate, not raising it, because it was such a massive success when we did it. I mean, we brought in over $1 trillion of capital from the rest of the world when we cut that corporate tax rate. We became a magnet of capital. By the way, Biden wants to double the capital gains tax, wants to raise unrealized capital gains. That would be a catastrophe for investors.
Ernie, you're probably ready. Your head's going to explode if I don't let you respond to those things. What your response?
Oh, look, I think that we're starting the American economy from an extraordinary place. The United States has had the #1 pandemic recovery in the G7. We've grown almost 9% in the G7. That's almost twice as much as the next highest growth in the G7. And by the way, our inflation has been about middle of the road in the G7. We have an unemployment rate at about 4.1%. So, this economy is in a very strong place. And I really worry that the Trump platform would severely damage where we are right now. You're talking about putting a tariff on all imports of 10%, 60% on Chinese imports. That means that if you're a small business, the cost of your inputs is about to skyrocket. If you're a middle-class consumer, your cost of living is about to go up by $2,500 a year. Consumers have told us loud and clear that they hate cost of living increases. And just where we've gotten inflation under control to the point where it looks like the Fed might be at the point where they're going to cut rates, Donald Trump is proposing a program where cost of living would go up again. And then you add on top of that other inflationary programs like possible deportation of immigrants, possible political influence over independent institutions, including the Federal Reserve. And it's just a potential catastrophic mix for American business and American consumers.
The first time around in the Trump administration, those worst case scenarios didn't happen, and there were tariffs actually put on. And until the pandemic, there were some pretty good numbers. And then a lot of the tariffs that you're talking about now, President Biden didn't even take, he left them on anyway. So I don't know if it'd be different this time around. You think it would be?
So we're talking about a difference of degrees here, right? So the Trump tariffs, which President Biden rejiggered into, sort of narrowly tailored national security tariffs on things like electric vehicles, right, are narrow tariffs on about $18 billion worth of imports coming in. What Trump is now proposing is a broad tariff on $3 trillion worth of imports, 60% on Chinese imports. So the weighted average would be even more on top of that, which is just, orders of magnitude even more in terms of impact. We haven't seen that since the mercantilist era of the 19th century in this country.
Ernie, I'm going to get back to Steve because he probably wants to respond to this, but I just got to ask you, taxing unrealized gains, doubling the capital gains tax, raising the corporate tax. Do you don't think any of that would be a negative for economic growth?
So let me say two things. So first of all, I think it bears emphasizing that Vice President Harris is now presidential candidate. She has to speak about what her agenda is as a presidential candidate, and I assume that she will in the coming weeks and months. So I don't want to speak for, where presidential candidate Harris is. I think that taxing unrealized gains is just, in terms of first principle economics, just a much better conversation to have than tariffs, right? Because there is an actual economic distortion there, versus tariffs. I'm open to a conversation about where that rate should be, and open to a broader conversation about investment incentives. I think that, people of good faith could have a very productive conversation about that. But I'd much rather have that conversation than a conversation, that starts from the premise of 10% broad tariffs and 60% tariffs on Chinese imports.